Probably respect.
Oh, huh. Okay.
By Aretha Franklin. I made it into an activist song, even if it wasn't.
What about you? What about you, Vic? Do you have a favorite activist song? Oh, you're on mute, so we're going to make it up for you.
Not really, but I could. For me, I could make one up with "Stairway to Heaven."
There you go. There you go. Very good. RJ gave you thumbs up. Well, welcome everybody.
It's all about participating, isn't it? So if he can make his own song up, that's better than another song, isn't it?
It is. Well, we're all about making things up, and tonight will be no different. It's going to be fun having some conversation with y'all. So we wanted to start. I'm going to share my screen and kind of go through some of the stuff that we want to just start off with around the unconference that you're attending. So get used to this. You'll be seeing it. This session is called Social Lessons of Transformation by Starfire. We'll introduce ourselves as a team here in a little bit. But we want to thank the people who have given their time to make this possible. And you can see a list of those good people right here. We also want to make sure that we get a chance to acknowledge the land, the country that we are coming from, and the people that came before us. And if you want to do that in the chat box, that'd be great. Put your name and where you're from, and maybe a land acknowledgement. That'd be super. Just a couple quick notes. Please remain muted unless you're speaking, in which case unmute and make sure you can limit the background noise. If you're playing Stairway to Heaven at full volume, just turn that down before you unmute. That would be super helpful. Or if your point is to share the wisdom of Led Zeppelin, then turn it up and unmute, I guess. Please limit turning your camera off and on as much as possible. And we just get insecure, so we prefer you stick to one or the other. And then we've got a tech support team. I think calling us that might be a stretch, but we largely know how to do Zoom, and we can maybe help you with that. We'll do our best. We are recording these sessions, so try to keep any incriminating details out of the chat box and off the official record. So let's get started. Like I said, introduce yourself in the chat box, share your information, all this stuff, your first name, your pronouns, your location, and if applicable, the acknowledgement of the country for the land you are currently on. Also, just announcing the ABCD ebook, and you can check that out. It's abcd-ebook.site. So this is a little test if you're having problems with your speakers, and if you have any bandwidth problems, maybe try to close all your background stuff and turn off your video. And then notify the hosts here if you want a live transcript activated. Okay, so we will stop that share and make sure, is there anything in the chat box, Bridge, that we need to attend to, or is this just announcements?
Yeah, introduction.
Cool. Okay, terrific. All right, welcome. So we'll get started, and just real quickly, want to introduce ourselves and a little bit about what we'll be talking with you about today. So Bridget, you want to kick us off, and then maybe Danyetta, follow her, and Carol, and then I'll go.
Okay, hello. I'm Bridget, and I'm in Kentucky, but speaking of Starfire, that's in Cincinnati, Ohio, and here tonight to kind of talk about working as a staff at Starfire and our work on community building projects.
And hello, everyone. My name is Danyetta Najoli, and I'm a senior community builder at Starfire. I also live in Cincinnati, Ohio, originally from New York City. I've had the fortune to work at Starfire for over 11 years, and today I'll share what we've been learning about systems and forces of the past, systemic forces of the past, and that we are currently up against and working to move beyond. And I'll share with you 3 participatory and immersive learning experiences, one of which we were inspired by, and the other 2 we developed in-house as a way to launch people into their own highly personalized learning journeys. And so I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Hi, my name is Carol, and I'm the Family Leadership Coordinator for Starfire. Tonight, I get to share the story of the family work that Starfire has been doing over the last 4 years. And intertwined with that is some of our own personal journey as a family. So we're excited to be here tonight.
Yeah. And I'm Tim Vogt. I am 1 floor below Bridget. So she's directly above me. And we've been working together for 21 years, and really excited to share the stories tonight. And my part of the story is having worked at Starfire and kind of noticing that some of the historic forces that Danyetta will tell you about were kind of getting us off kilter. And we had to create a new structure that we felt is more equitable and holds us to better work. So that's what you're going to hear from us. We're going to have small groups. We'll have 4 of them, and you'll get a visit from each of us in those small groups, and you'll get a chance to hear 4 different stories. So if you need anything, we will be here. One group will be here in the main room, so you can just put that in the chat box, or you can, raise your hand and somebody can come talk to you or talk to the person in your room. We're all co-hosts, okay? Cool. Really glad and grateful that y'all are here. And we want to start with tying our story to this unconference for asset-based community development. So this is Starfire, and our old story was a pretty familiar one. We ran outings for human beings with disabilities. We took them bowling and out to eat and shopping, big groups, 6, 7 people. And then we got really ambitious, and we raised $4 million, and we bought a building, and we filled it up with 150 human beings with disabilities, and we started building the Medicaid system. And we were making money hand over fist. We were super successful. We were winning awards. I, in particular, was the director of all that, and we were doing just fine. We had 45 staff. Everybody wanted to work for us, and we had plenty of funders just offering us support all the time. We were interrupted by a couple things, but in particular, we were interrupted by a visit from these 3 wise people. I put their pictures up here, and I'll tell you about them in their visit to Cincinnati. I also put some of their books that we love a lot. The person on the left is Peter Block. Next to him is John McKnight, who I hope everybody coming to an ABCD unconference knows. And to the right of John is Judith Snow. They came in 2007, 2008, somewhere around there in Cincinnati, and I attended. And Peter got up and asked us the first provocative question of the evening. He said, how come every story about Cincinnati is about its problems? He said, we have thousands of beautiful stories in this city, and all we talk about is what's wrong with the city, what's wrong with the people that live here. He said, I think there's a better story, right? And remember, we're rocking and rolling. Me and Bridget are doing well. Danyetta's doing just fine in her work. Carol is probably somewhere being awesome as well. We didn't know her back then. And Peter sits down, and I think this guy's a little different. And then this guy, John McKnight, gets up, and I'd never heard of his name either. And he says, he talks about the fact that he has a bad heart. He says, my bad heart is worth $500,000 to the hospitals in Chicago. He said, but it's not worth anything to my family or to my community. He said, I want you to remember one thing. Beware of people who profit off of other people's problems. And I listened and I thought, oh crap, I think he's talking about us, because we were definitely profiting off of people's problems. And I was starting to feel a little less interested and a little more angry. And then Judith got up and she was the keynote that night. And she said, there's no such thing as disability. She said, it's a social construct. It doesn't even mean anything. She said, for somebody, it means they need help with their checkbook. For somebody else, it means that they need help moving around with a wheelchair or a walker. For somebody else, it means they can't see. Somebody else, it means they can't hear. Just like, how does this one term define all those different human experiences? And she says, where does it end? She said, I can do things, I can give speeches that blow people's mind around the world, and you can't. Do you have a disability? And so I left thinking that these hippies were crazy and had no business talking to us like this, because we were serious social workers and doing, really precious community work. But there was something very stirring about what they had to share that night, and it stuck with us. So I just wanted to give you that as our start to the evening. You had the leader of asset-based community development and two people who we consider mentors and brilliant human beings that came in and asked us three provocative questions. What are you doing if you're profiting off other people's problems? What are you doing if you're going around labeling people and limiting their life? And what are you doing telling stories about what's wrong with everybody, right? So with that, we're going to break up into 4 rooms, and you'll hear 4 versions of the stories that came out of that. And Bridget, you're gonna keep here first and send Carol to room 1, I guess, and Danyetta to room 2, and I'll go to room 3. And we'll have 12 minutes, okay?
Yes, so you guys will
Okay.
get your invitation to your room. Some of you aren't, because you're staying here with me. So don't be alarmed if you don't get broken out into a room.
A lot of people shouting out the Goshorn brothers. They're terrific. And yes, they're from Cincinnati.
Okay, I think we are all where we belong, except for Danyetta is half in and half out, it appears. So I don't know where she is. Her rooms might have an issue. Oh, there she went. Okay, good, because she's their storyteller. All right, so I am going to share a bit about what our work was like at Starfire and what it was like as a staff person. So Tim mentioned I've worked at Starfire for over 20 years. We've been working together. So we're an agency in Cincinnati who works with people with disabilities. When I was hired, When I was hired at Starfire, I was hired as an outing leader. So I was taking small groups of people with disabilities out in the community to all different kinds of stuff around town. Just basic entertaining, short couple hours here and there at the zoo or at a football game, bowling, things like that. We put things on our calendar that were had a lot of appeal to a lot of people. Random groups of people, just depend on who signed up. There are about over 400 people at that time with disabilities that were joining our group. You look at the pictures, everybody's smiling. I mean, we're all just being entertained, right? So, but we definitely, as we get to know people more and more, we start to realize there's more that we could be doing. And we decided to open up a day program. So what that looks like was a building with about 100 people with disabilities showing up each day, Monday through Friday, from 9 to 3 or thereabouts. And that's what our program did. There are plenty of like these all over, where people with disabilities come and spend their time. We, after the experience that we'd had with our evening programs and doing that, we decided we were going to make ours really meaningful, and we're going to be all about skill building. And we had special educators give us curriculums that we could build on for people in their adult lives and all this great stuff. It was always in a large group. So we had cooking classes in the building, banking, how to, write a check, as well as going out in the community in vans of large groups of people to do service projects, maybe some dance lessons, whatever was out there. My role pretty much at this point as a staff was a lot of crowd control and keeping track of people and making sure people were in the right place at the right time, doing the right class, and all of those kinds of things of what we were trying to do. And again, caring about people is why we got into the work. I love my job, but starting to talk to people and their families, an ongoing question that parents have is, who's going to be in my life and who's going to care about my child when I'm gone? So hearing that question echoed again and again, we definitely, you hear that and you kind of think, why is that such a question? Talking to people with disabilities and reading more, we start to realize that there is a real hole in their social networks. People who come and spend the day with people with disabilities and staff have a lot of people with disabilities and staff people in their social network. They have their family, immediate family, and some, depending on how big their families are, there's not a lot of community members. There aren't a lot of people as they would consider friends. So we started to really look long and hard at that. As Tim said too, we started to hear from this crazy John McKnight guy about asset-based community development and who cares about you and the value you hold, and be careful the people that profit off of you, right? So those kinds of questions are things we're starting to ask ourselves. The other reality of staff, so that one picture up there of all the yellow in the box, those are a variety of staff files that came and went. That's not all of them in the time that I've been here. There's quite a few more. So there's kind of a rotating cast to the staff. So we had that question, if what we're doing is really helping people, and if that's what we want, then we might need to make some changes. Studying some more about asset-based community development, we made some changes. So my role, we stopped the day program and this was over time, it wasn't instant, but we stopped doing the group work. And we started to commit as a staff just to working with one person at a time, and really leaning into what that person's gifts and assets were, what they really cared about. My role, instead of just filling time and finding entertainment, was looking for the people in the community that shared the interest and gifts of the person I'm working with. So in this picture, I've called someone who does fashion design and designs her own clothes, and we're having coffee and talking to her about her gifts and passions. So a lot more time in community, a lot more time with lots of people, in the hopes that we're going to fill in some of that gap that people with disabilities have, that they don't have those connections beyond their family. And who better to talk to Anne here about makeup and fashion. It's not me. If you can tell, I am not the same as those ladies. As a staff, I do not share those gifts and talents, but I can find those people and they can get to know her and really help her to explore who she is and who she wants to be as a young person. That's what a lot of us do, right? We connect with other people and we kind of find ourselves. No one's purpose in life was born to be a client, right? And that is kind of what we realized, that there were a lot of people in our building whose whole identity was around being a client and that label of disability. So we made those changes. So we also had the question around, if we're meeting these good people and we're spending time making invitations and asking people to coffee or to go for walks with us to get to know someone, one of the people that we're working with, what do we do next? And what we came to was that maybe there was some way to build something new for people around what they enjoy and what they love. So getting the circle of people that we had that Plenty of coffees didn't go much further than a coffee or a walk, but there were those that were interested in doing more and spending more time together. If we found those people, getting them in a room together to say what could happen, what could we help facilitate and make happen around drumming or fashion or sewing. And the ideas were limitless, but also led to by the people that wanted to create something. It wasn't from me as the staff telling them, here's what you've got to do. You should do a project around drumming and it's got to be this and at this time. Very much our old schedules would have dictated a lot of those things of what was offered and when, versus asking them what they thought was possible and what they'd like to create. So, drumming circles on a regular basis and rehearsals to an ultimate performance together, fashion shows with makeup. The bottom corner is a woman who liked to sew, getting to know a lot of women, and they got together and did like charity sewing together. I can promise you that in the day program, we never got out 10 sewing machines and sewed them all at once. Like that would not have been something we didn't do. Like what we could offer was never as unique and as meaningful to people. It was always what will please the crowd, right? What's the easier thing to throw out there? What we saw when we did those projects, and we're still doing them, is that there was a shift in people's identities. You could see people's confidence, autonomy, everything grow and feel better about themselves. And we definitely know that their networks grew. Lots of potential for connections and meeting into the future. So beyond what we could control, it's not my role also to make sure that people fall in love and keep together forever, but to set the stage that that could be possible is really what we were looking for. So an example of one in particular, this is Jenny. I worked with her. So she's the woman up there in the pink shirt. She uses a walker in our day program with groups of people with disabilities. Jenny many times got overshadowed, or it would be really hard to get to know her to the degree that you could when you're working just one at a time. Her speech is really slow, pretty hard to understand, totally understandable, but it takes time and it takes an open mind to hear her. So Jenny, when I started working with her, really wanted to be a part of a volunteer. So we found this amazing place called Bake Me Home. It was actually in her neighborhood, close to home, which was one of our goals, trying to keep it as close as possible if we could. She also loved yoga and meditation. So we had been connecting with some women around that and going to classes. And some of the women that you see there, they got together to discuss what Jenny, if she wanted to do a project, they could all do it together. What would they do? And they did a day of yoga that was donation based to go back to fund Bake Me Home. So in this time, it was awesome because it was close, like as Jenny became that role of volunteer, and she also would overlap and see people from church and other people from the neighborhood who would see her and then know that she had this role of volunteer and that she was very much a part of it, of that group. In the time that she did that, her change in identity, her parents, she used to say she would never get a community job. After doing the project and being a volunteer at Bake Me Home, she said she wanted a community job and she's got one. It's on hold now, but she had one. She's gone back to it now. She's a hostess at a restaurant. So she's kind of gone back and forth because of COVID. So some of the stuff that we learned is that there's not really an us and them. And we had to take a real hard look at ourselves to say how we had created some of those barriers for people with disabilities. What had we been doing? What was our programming like that really put some of that? Large groups of people showing up in white vans. How are we blocking, in some ways, creating that for the community? My job was not to fix anyone or really to teach skills. It was to help and connect them to other people. That's all that really matters for what they wanted to do. I had to start seeing people with disabilities as partners in the work. They were going to be the creators, not just consumers. So previously it was just entertainment versus people with gifts that have amazing creative ideas that I would never think to do. Beyond just the examples that I gave, that there's dream interpretation groups now around Cincinnati because of a man, who knows, this stuff that I would never think of. That overall, with each of these projects, we're trying to heal the culture and helping people know each other is going to heal us all and make our neighborhoods healthier and better. we still have the question of how do we do more? How do we create more community? How do we give more power to more citizens to create that? And what can we do in our own communities? What are those things? And are there any, that's kind of it for me. Are there any questions from you guys?
I would love to just thank you, Bridget, for sharing that with us. Especially when you speak to the music making. So my specialism, like I'm a community musician, which is a term that's only really understood by a small selection of people in academia. Before I studied music education, I didn't know what it was, but I'd always been doing community music. And you're talking to you're doing. Sorry, it's 1:30 in the morning here. And, right, so it was So I think it was really powerful how you spoke to the connection making work that you've been doing, and particularly it highlighted for me. You were talking about like music making with people together, and I even got there's like okay, so this is really what I'm getting at. So it's like when we're doing our work, the work doesn't happen through us, does it? As asset-based community development people, the work happens through the other existing vibrations which happen around the work we do, which already exist. And I think it was really powerful how you spoke to that in a way that I'm not articulating very well. I really appreciate it, and thank you, Bridget.
Definitely. Thank you all. So I believe Carol should be joining you guys.
Yes, I'm here.
Are you there? Okay, I don't see you. So I'm going to go into room 3 and start over.
All right. Hello, all. Time flies in these rooms, so I am gonna share my screen, and we're just gonna jump right in. If you all are okay with that. All right. So you all have seen me introduced as Carol, the Family Network Coordinator for Starfire. And tonight, I get to give you another introduction. So my most favorite and valued role that I hold is being a mom. And I have 3 amazing kids, Briella, Charlie, and Grayson. We live in the city of Hamilton, Ohio, which is just north of Cincinnati. And our favorite place right now is our front porch. Over the last 4 years, we have been on a treasure hunt of sorts within our family and within our community. And as a family, we've discovered that we are made up of artists, community builders, listeners, connectors, teachers, and hosts. But it's not always been that way. 13 years ago, my son was diagnosed with a disability. We spent 10 days inpatient, and we were told at diagnosis that his life was going to be hard, that we would be lucky if we had him 2 to 5 years, take him home and make him comfortable. As we prepared to leave and enter the world with this new diagnosis, I was given a list of specialists that would reach out and contact us, a list of diagnoses, medications, and an emergency number. And I was handed a plan of sorts that detailed what Grayson's life would be like. And before me, I had a 5-month-old son, a piece of paper with a very short timeline and a very long list of can'ts, won'ts, and nevers. This image here on the screen became our life. Everything we did revolved around services and Grayson's disability. So much so that his disability began to define who we were as a family. And in fact, this was my social network about 4 years ago. At diagnosis, I joined every disability thing that I could find, from special needs support groups to disability-only programs to special events held just for children with disabilities. If I wasn't a part of it, I knew of it. And when I look back to that stack of papers given to me at diagnosis, there was nothing about the importance of connections for Grayson and our family, nothing about what a good life looks like for Grayson, nothing about cans and wills or the possibilities of more. It was all focused on what he couldn't do. And as a parent, I was stuck lonely, and at the mercy of the systems. I knew we needed something different. And about that time, Starfire entered the picture for us. So my colleague, Tim, at the time, he was just a Starfire person. I didn't really know him, came and spoke to a leadership group. And what he said to me in that group that day was this radical idea that it wasn't people with disabilities that made life harder, that was the problem, it was the culture. The culture is what made it hard for people with disabilities to live a good life. And that people with disabilities had the right to live under their own name, supported, connected, accepted, and free. So what Tim said that day was like, oh, wait, this is something I need to know more. So I emailed Tim, said, hey, can we grab coffee? I have questions. And I intended to push back on Tim. I was like, hold on, wait a second. What you're saying is, but what I learned is that Starfire had recently started looking at people with disabilities and their families as colleagues, partners in the work. They also began to recognize that being in community and being a part of community were two different things. We could be in community, but that doesn't mean we're a part of it. And that there was a difference between activities and valued roles. Around this time, Starfire was starting to ask some questions around families too. What if we started connecting with them younger? What if we started supporting families and building a network of support around their child with a disability at a younger age? What happens if we place the families at the center of a connected community and provided them space to hold and do the cool things right where they're at instead of having to go somewhere? What if we could support them in creating something unique and beyond services? From this, the family leadership projects were born. And how this worked was Starfire had been paying staff, educating them, sending them to trainings and all these different things. And then the staff would leave and they'd have to start all over. And Tim's like, I bet you if we place some money, I would bet on families. Families are the consistent. So what Starfire did was take one staff salary for 1 year and invest it into families. Families got money to do something cool, both at the front end and the back end of a project. So Starfire was paying families to launch a project and paying them again when they completed the project and giving them some money to do some really cool things. They were trusting the families to know what they needed. The parameters for this was families had to meet Tim for coffee once a month for some mentoring, where we would take a deep dive into learning what we were up against, what it meant to lead a good life, and work through barriers and obstacles that maybe we were facing as we worked through projects. And then these 4 commitments came into play, and they served as the guardrails to help us reach the goals of the projects, which were more connections, an identity beyond disability, and to heal the culture that was making life hard. I was one of those first-year families, and this is our story of transformation. So prior to doing a family project, I couldn't tell you what gifts Grayson had. In fact, it's sad to say that I had never thought about Grayson having gifts because I was so stuck on that list of can'ts, won'ts, and nevers. We had never explored the community that we called home my entire life. And if it didn't include services, we said no because it was easier that way. Going out into community, being around people who maybe wouldn't understand was scary. And so it was easier just to pull back and say, here's our bubble. But we were lonely. This community project, we came together as a family and decided we wanted to learn how to sew. Our good friend Sandy just happened to know how to sew and quilt. And we spent the summer of 2018 showing up weekly and sewing at a local park that had meaning to us. We met over 30 people during this time. And some of the most important lessons I learned was that Grayson could live under his own name and be known for his gifts, not his disability. And that up until that point, I was denying people the opportunity to get to know Grayson. I was denying Grayson the opportunity to get to know people in our community simply out of fear. The project and the mentorship was transformative for us. The lessons around social role valorization and asset-based community development were eye-opening, and we as a family found our place of belonging and purpose. After our family project, we had discovered we held all these gifts and we wanted to continue to share them. We had also met people who had amazing gifts that wanted to share them with us. So we went on to do some really cool things over the last 2 years in our community. We have grown to love our community, and we have created a space where community loves us back. Remember that picture at the beginning where it was all service directed? That's what I remember about that picture the most, is that it was just the services telling us what we needed. This is our life now, and services is something that we'll always need. Grayson will always need services, but Grayson also needs community, and he needs a place where he can share his love and his gifts and be loved and have gifts given back to him. Our circle has grown over the last 4 years, and it's been amazing. These pictures showed the contrast for our family. We used to get up and do segregated program, but Grayson really didn't enjoy that, and there was no genuine natural connection. Now we show up in our community and we can sit and talk to Miss Linda. We can play ball on the same field that we host events in. And instead of music coming to us, we take the music to the community and we do cool caroling events. And it's all with the people that we've met during the process. What's really cool too is that the work hasn't stopped there. We have had 42 projects since 2017 launched across the United States. These are organizationally supported, but family and citizen enacted. It's their stories. Starfire supports families and guides them through the project process and provides them a space where they are free from the system just to be themselves, to be their family and community. What's been really exciting to see too is the way that Starfire continues to invest in families. We have a group of family leaders who show up and mentor other families through projects, co-create, pull off some really amazing events together, and it's all supported by Starfire. And it's just been really transformative for us. Families are able to live beyond services, to live an identity beyond disability, and that's really what's made communities more inclusive. That is our story. So I'm going to stop sharing and come back to you all. And we have a couple minutes for any questions or thoughts that you may have that you want to share out.
Just a comment, Carol, thank you for sharing. It was really, really great to hear. What I really liked was also the ripple effect of all of that, from just doing something and how all of those incidental interactions then kind of grow within community in your neighbourhood as well, which I really, really value. And so it was just really nice hearing and getting a different take on I guess, the wider community, but also I guess your family to a degree at the start, view on what disability is rather than what it isn't. So, and I'm kind of working at the moment with a program based on creating more community inclusion and participation for people with all abilities through volunteering. So it was just nice to hear your story and your journey. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Joni said as well. Thank you so much, Carol, for sharing that. It's truly inspirational and really powerful. And just give us a specific thing to flagship another awesome woman that I've worked with who's part of the ICCM community music place where I do my research at. Sarah Fisher, if you look her up, and she did things about community music specifically, but it's totally applicable to other stuff. And she has cerebral palsy, and but is an excellent human being who talks about specifically it's about what we can do, not what we can't do in that framework of disability. And so I just like to have flag that up for Sarah, and thank you again, Carol, for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's very easy to get lost in that list of can'ts, won'ts, and nevers that's handed down at diagnosis. I know this isn't an experience isolated to our family. I hear it all the time. And Starfire was such a refreshing, it was a breath of fresh air for me, right? I was like, wait, there is more out there, and we do. And Starfire trusts us as families, like to really know what is it and to be able to define community however we see fit. I see families define community around birding and horses and the love of something. And Starfire's like, here you go, we support you. Just don't make it about disabilities and make it really cool. And it really helped us redefine who we were as a family. Also, when I think about the health of Grayson, he's been healthier since we stepped into this. And we know that social connections are essential to who we are. And stepping into a space of community can be such a benefit. So, all right, our time is up, friends. I am bouncing to another room, but I will see you all soon.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you all so much.
I got very confused when I joined the session because I'm like, where is everybody?
I feel
didn't
like that
realise
now,
that I
confused,
joined.
like you know, everyone's left, and it's like, oh, what's the middle space here now? The liminal space that we're in. It's like 1:45 for me here now, and like you said,
I know,
Michelle
what are you
and
doing,
Dee.
Rory?
Yeah, I know, but you and Dee said that the other day that you were up all for 48 hours, and I like you know, I've thought about going to bed, and then I've joined something else, and it's been really interesting and applicable, and then so now I'm just sat here.
So have you joined the unconference challenge to see how long you can stay awake?
No, it's not. I'm not willingly joining the challenge. And let's frame ABCD. I'm not willingly joining the challenge, Michelle. You just made it too interesting for us to.
When I joined, I'm like, where is everyone? I didn't realize we were all in breakout rooms. So I thought, oh gosh, there's only a session. Yeah, there's all sorts of rooms happening here.
Danyetta, you're the only person I've not met previously person before.
Well, I'm glad to see you. RJ, do you go by RJ or
RJ? No, it's I'm Raw. My name's Rory.
Rory? Okay, nice to meet you, Rory, and everyone that's on this third version. Right, this is the room I'm supposed to be in, right, Tim? Maybe you're in here too, so that's making me wonder. You're on mute too, so if I need to.
I don't know where we're supposed to be. I'll go to one where nobody is. Okay. Carol's in room 1. Bridget's in room 2. Carol's in room 3 as well. No. I'll go to room 1. How about that?
Okay.
See ya. Have fun, Danyetta.
Thanks, Tim. It's a turbo situation. I'm not used to doing a quick presentation like this, so I'm gonna wring his neck, I think, later. I'm just kidding. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and kind of, let's see, yep, do the presentation. So today we're going to be naming the forces and systems that we're up against and hopefully courageously stepping into a better future. And we are going to look at it in 3 different chunks. And I'm going to try to hit the right button to get us to the next slide. And I did. Okay, I think it might go forward faster. It's not linked up for some reason, but these are the 3 areas. We're going to look at 3 participatory and immersive learning experience, 1 that we were inspired by and 2 that we co-developed. And then also we're going to look at the common institutional forces and the shared lessons that we took away from the experience and we continue to take away from the experience. And then finally, looking at the power of truth telling and healing and transformation and reconciliation so that overall we have a commitment to a better community. So these are the three areas that we'll talk about these three in a bit more detail soon, but we were inspired by the Kairos blanket exercise. Many of you may be familiar with the Kairos blanket exercise, and both the string exercise and the Black American Tree Project were developed by Starfire staff, namely Tim, Vogt, and myself. So Tim co-wrote the string exercise and I co-wrote the Black American Tree Project. And so the Kairos blanket exercise depicts the decimation and historical violence done to First Nations people of Canada by colonists and their succeeding governments. The exercise uses blankets to cover the sacred lands and honors the First Nations people. Participants usually opt in to read a reading or participate, and then the goal of the exercise is to promote education and reconciliation among indigenous and non-indigenous people. So as you can see here, the project was done inside what looks like a school, students, and then the other one was done outdoors. And so the other exercise is called the string exercise. And this is something that was developed a few years back, just over the learning that we had with the people that Tim mentioned. And so it's an account detailing the dominant cultural societal forces institutionalizing people with disabilities. And some of the testimonies that are used in this exercise is a compilation of people's experiences, people that we know of or that we know. And the exercise's goal is to highlight the power and structure of the forces of institutionalism. We wanted participants to comprehend and feel, based on factual evidence, the atrocities of institutionalized operations, and both past and present as well, because a lot of this is still happening, and whether well-intentioned or not, and the role of authority and family and community play in conjunction with these forces. So here is some examples of the forces on the left. We can all probably relate to these. And then on the right is the actual setup of how the project is arranged. We have the institutional area, which is in a box. Everything is masking based on like very low bar to replicate. So there's masking tape and there's chairs and there's papers for people to read, and then maybe a couple of other things as well. But here you see people in the institution, people seated around are the forces. Here's another example of family members connected by a bond. And then on the left is where the bond had to be severed based on the exercise. And then on the right is where someone's being escorted to the edge of society. And at the end, we do practice healing and coming out of those roles. It's so important to do that. And so as we move through, we are now talking about the Black American Tree Project, which is a collaborative and participatory history lesson that looks at what happened to the Black American from pre-colonial Africa to present day America. And it's hosted through narration and the reading of scripted roles. There's 10 vignettes. There could be more, but the project is set up for 10. And, Starfire had sent me along a while ago, several years ago, to understand SRV training, understand social role valorization and devaluation of people with disabilities. So when I had gone through those 4 days of full immersion training, I thought, well, there's got to be a parallel here between African Americans. It seems to be, I can see it very clearly just by my own life and my own history and family history. And so I began to explore to see if there was any research, and there wasn't anything done at all about this topic. And even the author, Dr. Wolfensberger, had said of the author of Social Role Valorization, that this could be applied to any marginalized group. So we began to, research that. And so we said, if the blanket is to the blanket exercise, Kairos blanket exercise, and the string is for the string exercise, what is it for the Black American? And we landed on the tree, because the tree in African American culture is very significant. The roots, the understory, the overstory, the solid thing that it provides, the nurturing, canopy. And so we wanted to look at the tree. We started focusing on this central image, and we created, this is the virtual version of the project, because we had to shift to virtual platforms after COVID. But you can see the full tree is here. The triangles represent the institutional forces, like John McKnight talks about, they're in hierarchical triangles. And we also have the tree that has the Black American focused person plus their family member. And at the bottom is the edge of society, which is empty right now. But by the end of the project, we show how the edge of society was fully populated by Black Americans, and the institutional forces have descended, escorted them to that edge and stayed there over them. And then the families have been decimated, and it shows that depiction there. But it takes you through a few hours. We do about 3 hours when you include the courageous community conversations, which we'll talk about. Here you can see the institutional forces, and you can also see on the left the tree that was done in person. It's very basic, and all the family members are on the branches, and we just take people through the project. The forces are listed plus their title. And that's there, but we take you through from pre-colonial Africa all the way to society, which deals with white supremacy or white advantage, and then those are the roles. Again, some examples of the project itself. We did this for an International Student Summit at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in February of 2020. And we've since then done it for, we've done it 18 times for over 370 people when you count the virtual prototypes. And so this is showing the healing part of the project after the project is done, because it does look at all of the shadow side of what happened to the African American, and we wanted to make sure that we brought closure, and people turning to each other, in community is so important. So what were some of the common themes we asked from this? And what we had to see, what we realized is that all exercise identified forces that seem to change over time, but bearing the same DNA as previous iterations of that force. We also saw that how forces interplay with each other and influence each other. Of course, we know that the forces do that, even though we broke them out for the impact. We obviously know that the forces can overlap with people's lives. And by naming them separately, though, we make them more visible. And everyone who attends has an opportunity to participate. So we don't really have observers, because we want people to have that visceral experience of reading the script and walking away with an experience of their own. And it actually has a healing component to our project, because we have conversations, and that conversation is so rich because we never know who's coming, and we have breakout sessions. Sometimes we can do affinity group breakout sessions where we can hack the whole racial group dynamics that inevitably occur, where you have like maybe white silence, and then you may have Black people maybe speaking for their entire race. They, the whole spectrum. But when you have the affinity groups, then there's that inherent like relief there. There's healing that happens, and plus there's also just different types of dialogue that can happen in that kind of setting. And the projects require deep listening and are considered a contemplative art, actually. It's huge for mental health too. And so we ask ourselves, like, what did we learn in this process? Well, the first thing with the Black American Tree Project, we learned how to host this project virtually, which was wasn't an easy task, because we had to put this whole thing together that was literally in person on a virtual platform. So thanks and kudos to the Toronto Summer Institute folks. That would be Beth Mount, who brought it over back to them, Linda Kahn and Jack Pearpoint. They were phenomenal in helping us get this on a virtual platform. We also learned that courageous conversations are both challenging, but they're certainly worth it if you can push through it and know that you're in a brave and safe space. And the better you're out of your echo chamber, the better your reactions to the change can be. Also, healing can be both collective. We all learned about collective healing. You've seen the pictures of us collectively healing, but then it's also highly personal, and everyone has their own journey. So the last thing I'll say is that it's okay to sit with sadness and anger, confusion, and injustice while in a brave and safe space of the exercises, knowing that we will move to a place of hope and healing where we all have experienced something new together. So the project helps people to experience something new together. And one of the common questions we received while hosting the project is, what can we do next? Like, people are interested in like, what can I do? And what we're learning is that it takes more than 5 easy steps to dismantling structural and institutional forces. We all know that, right? Because these are wicked problems, so we don't have a 5-point plan. But the next step might mean something different for each person. So I wrestle with having like any like to-do list or some kind of resource list. But I have gotten to the point where I can share like resources that are learning in nature that keeps you engaged in a conversation, civic discussion, or thinking about things. For instance, Mourning, the creation of racial categories was formed by a sociology teacher in a neighboring school here in Kentucky. And that's an amazing thing online. And it just takes you through a process where you're like, wow, somebody actually created that. Middle Eastern and North Africa is actually a racial category in America. And I didn't even know that until I was doing this project. So it's called MENA. But anyway, it's just really good to be able to know that there are resources available. And my last question is, where do you see community budding? Because that's really where, if you see community peeking out in these spaces, that's where we would ask people to lean in authentic ways, because that's really where it's at. And with asset-based community development, it is about learning and growing together. And we can step in that direction and see what happens, because there are some good things that can come out of it. So that's my presentation. Okay. I appreciate that. Any questions or any reactions? We do have some time.
My reaction is I absolutely fucking loved it. Like, right.
I love your reaction.
I think it's these critical questions that you're speaking to there, right? If I broadly put it, right, like these are the important questions for the development of asset-based community development. These critical questions, and it's about critical friendship. And you spoke to so many things that are like what I love, but like, I guess if we problematize it after I've been a fanboy, so from what I see in my practice in England, working with diasporic cultures, emerging cultures who aren't diasporic, they've only lived their life in this tower block, these places, right? These critical race questions, it's not just critical race necessarily, but it's critical power questions which inform intersectional ideas of like, you know, blah blah blah. We can, you know, they are the question that is not asked often. And I thank you so much for having asked that. And I'll ask the question, is there a problem with whiteness in this conference? And I don't mean to, this isn't me trying to disparage you, Michelle, or any of this. This is a question that I speak to myself in as well. You know what I mean? I'm not asking you to speak on the whiteness of this conference either, because it's not your, you know, I just problematize it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
for everyone, I'm not asking you to speak to that either.
Are you asking that of me, or?
I'm 100% not asking that of you. I'm asking that generally, because it's, you know, okay, none of us can solve these questions and answers, can we? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the whole thing of what are you noticing? I love when Tim says that. I'm glad he just came on, because he has asked that question a lot, and that small question of what are you noticing? That's something to notice, right? Like, oh, like, you know, that's a question that I'm always asking, because as a Black American, I want to know, like, where are all the Black people? You know, like, who else is here that that represent and look like me? You know.
So I grew up in a place in Leeds, diasporic, let's talk about that. So like white till the cows come home. But my grandmother is a racial category they have on forms in England of an Irish traveller. These, you know, just weird things that they have. But I you know, lived for years in a community which had the oldest West Indian carnival in Europe.
Wow.
You know, it's still in, it had all that. So it's like, you know, like if you know Irish steppers, if you're into dub music, like, you know, like Leeds West Indian Centre is a big place of, you know, I mean, connections of cultures.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm a native New Yorker, so anything that's, Caribbean or any culture, really, even here in Cincinnati, the German culture is so rich. There's so many cultures, and I just celebrate cultures, the goodness of cultures, and being okay with that, But it takes conversations. It really does, like you said, it takes stretching ourselves and being willing to have these courageous conversations, which is what we're doing.
Hey, Danyetta.
Courageous conversations, like you said. Sorry, I was like the courageous conversations, like
courageous
conversations. So I've done like community music is some weird thing
Hey,
that
I'm going
did.
to have a courageous conversation with you all.
But-
Danyetta, I just got kicked out of my breakout room by Bridget, which means I'm here to kick you out of this one.
Okay. Which one do I get?
Are you done?
I am done. We were wrapping up.
And then Ashley, I'll check in with you. Have you seen everybody? Do you want to go hang out with somebody that you haven't heard from yet?
Which one do I go into?
Danyetta, I think you need to be in 2. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen Carol yet, Tim.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, I'll send you. How about that? I'll send you to Carol's room. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
She is in room 3. Assign to room 3. I feel so powerful.
Thank you.
See ya. You can just like yank people out and send them places, and if they're misbehaving, you send them to room. I don't know. Anyway, this is recorded, so I shouldn't be loosey-goosey here. Welcome. Good to see you all. How's things been? Good. You've heard from Danyetta. You've heard from Carol.
Really
You've heard from Bridget. Amazing people, aren't they? All right, cool.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim.
You're very welcome. And Michelle, thank you for all you've done to make this whole thing happen. We're really honored and happy to be a part of it.
Oh, my pleasure. And I do it as much for me as for everybody else, because it's great to bring everybody together and hear some great stories and things like that. So wonderful.
Carol, you are in the wrong room. You've already been in the main room.
I don't know how to get to the room I'm supposed to go, though.
Okay, click on the More button and click on Breakout Rooms, and then go to where you want.
Okay, thank you.
And then now Ashley's texting me that she got kicked out, so I'm going to move her to room 2. Carol's supposed to be in room 2.
Yep.
And,
all right. See you.
And then, am I supposed to move Danyetta to room? Let's see here. Okay. Cool. All right. I think we're good now. Danyetta, are you supposed to be in room 3?
You're on mute, Danyetta. I love Tim. You're just flinging people around everywhere.
Carol, thank you for that, Michelle. Carol is in that room.
No, she's not. She left. She went to room 2 where she's supposed to be, and you're in room 3. So you gotta go to room 3. All right. See ya.
I'll go back. See ya. Gotta figure out how we get there. Okay.
So it's either this or we just like move our hosts around. So they'll. You good, Danyetta?
Yes, I am. I see it now. I see it now.
Cool.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Have fun. All right, you all. Thanks for hanging with us. We are awesome Zoom extraordinaires. Just so you know, when we got done with all the transformation that you heard about from Carol and from Bridget, and when we got done with some of the learning that you heard about from Danyetta, we kind of understood 2 things. The first thing is that throughout that entire process of transition, we had operated under a value system that we hadn't even been conscious of. And it was like more money, assumptions about social work, assumptions about community, assumptions about disability. All these things were in our heads and we hadn't really chosen them. We just inherited them. We absorbed them through the culture, right? So when we discovered our way out of those old values and assumptions, we sat down in 2019 and we said, how could we set up a set of values that's strong enough to hold us accountable, that's strong enough to point us toward good work? And so we huddled up and we came up with what we call our core values. And happy to tell you that tonight is the first time that we're actually sharing those outside of our organization. So Bridget and Danyetta and me and Carol have been living and breathing these for a couple of years, but we're sharing them with you tonight as a way to help you understand the new structure that we have stepped into, okay? So I'm gonna share these with you, and we're gonna go through just some quick little questions and things around them. These are the core values that Starfire has adopted. I'll read them in a minute and we'll go into each one on its own. One thing I want to tell you though is actually two things. One is that we had to live our way into these. So remember, we didn't know all this. We weren't this wise. We weren't this intentional. We weren't this smart. We had to live our way into it. And that's important because we think that 99.9% of the world is operating under those old values and assumptions that we were operating under. And so what we're asking is, could we figure out a way to help people start where we ended? We think where we ended is pretty great, and we wonder if that might not be a better starting place for others. So we love sharing our story like we are tonight. So let's get started. Real quickly, the first core value is to be a voice that challenges the status quo of a culture that excludes people with disabilities. Real critical. It's not disability that's the problem, okay? We can acknowledge that historical cultural values are what makes someone's life hard, not their disability. It ain't about Down syndrome or autism or cerebral palsy. It's about the way our culture treats autism, Down syndrome, and cerebral palsy, right? It makes their life hard, it makes their family's life hard. We can facilitate, support the community into living up to its responsibility for inclusion of all its members. Before we understood this value, we let the community off the hook. We said, send us people with disabilities and send us money and we'll take care of it and you won't hear anything. You won't have to do anything. Just keep sending us money and dropping people with disabilities off at our programs and everything will be fine. But that wasn't helping the community live into its call and its responsibility to include everyone. We also discovered that we could honestly study the mistakes of the past and commit to working toward a better story of the future. So you heard a lot of this from Danyetta, which was if we can take stock of old mistakes and then not make them again and step into new stories, it's a much better place to start. But studying the past is critical if we're going to avoid those same pitfalls. The second core value is to understand what people and families are up against. One of the things that they're up against is the idea that their identity solely rests on disability. We discovered that building and strengthening new positive identities to shape people's lives was a powerful way forward. Not that we discounted disability as an aspect of someone's identity or an aspect of their family experience, but that people with disabilities were also poets, and people with disabilities also loved soccer, and people with disabilities were also activists in their local politics, and people with disabilities loved to have a beer after work, right? So these were things that we could help people develop that were in addition to disability, that also helped families discover what more identities could they have. We also discovered that we could reach beyond superficial outcomes and embrace the work of building whole inclusive communities. What we were doing before was essentially saying, we'll help people with disabilities have fun. We'll take them bowling and we'll make sure they're safe for the most part, right? What we discovered was that there's something more to life than being warehoused in our building, that we had a deeper call. If culture was the problem, then it had to be healed. And we could be the ones doing that work. And if we did, then that meant that people with disabilities and their families were partners in that work with us, right? And that we were looking for a safety that comes from belonging in community, not the safety that comes from having our staff make sure that you don't leave the building. That makes sense, right? A deeper source of safety. We also decided that we could invest our resources in family and community instead of just employing staff, right? So Bridget and I have worked at Starfire for 21 years. In that time, there have been 200 other people on our payroll. Wonderful people, did great social work, the best they knew how, but they're gone. And so what we discovered is a better bet is investing in family. A better bet is investing in community. A better bet is helping people with disabilities be known by other people and helping them develop those identities and those connections and make contributions to a better culture, rather than just keeping employing the same old rotating cast of characters, right? And it's wonderful. I mean, we sold ourselves as a bastion of stability, but at the end of the day, the name Starfire has lasted for 25 years, but Starfire really hasn't been the same. It just keeps changing and people keep coming and going, right? So that we figured out we better invest in a more stable way forward, which is community. My favorite one here is to approach the work with 360 degrees of dignity. This is such a powerful question. Is everybody involved here experiencing dignity, right? And you never actually quite get there, I don't think. It's always like, we're at 180. Okay, we're at 260 or something, right? Or we're at 359, but we're looking for 360 degrees of dignity. What we mean by this is we can do good work without asking people to be used as other people's service projects or charity cases. It's a big shift for us. We were selling people with disabilities. We were selling isolation and sadness to the community. We were saying, hey, you want to feel good about yourself, write us a check, right? We were saying, hey, you want to feel good about yourself, go help this person with a disability, go volunteer for us, right? And we realized that that had a diminishing impact on people's lives, that they were always living in that socially devalued role of being used as someone else's charity project, right? And stories like Danyetta's, stepping into somebody's skin, stepping into somebody's shoes, really helped us understand the impact of that in somebody's life. We also discovered that we can bravely measure the absence or the presence of traumatizing microaggressive labels, of which disability is one, as part of our self-evaluation. So the word disability itself carries a lot of baggage with it. It defines everything about a person in the cultural kind of mindset. So all of a sudden, if I have a disability, I get lumped in with everyone else who has a disability. I get sent to all the disability places, right? And then my entire life is a reminder of my disability, is a reminder of the way that society sees my life as a problem. That's a trauma, and that's a microaggression. And the more that we attach segregation as a condition of service to the lives of people with disabilities, the more that we recreate that trauma and recreate those microaggressions, right? And we have to figure out how do we liberate ourselves and our service system and the people that rely on it from that experience. We also discovered that we could celebrate and support each person's purpose and orient our logistics around it. What I mean by that is, we had always said that our logistics go first. Here's our building, here's our money, here's our staff, here's our time. This is what you do with it, right? Instead, we said, well, what do you want to become? And how do we help provide our money and our staff and our time and our resources to supporting that to happen? When you start with purpose and a person's unique purpose, it just defines your logistics in an entirely different way. Where we do it ends up being at the neighborhood church or the cafe down the street or the park with the nice big lawn instead of at Starfire's building, right? So we had to orient purpose first and let logistics follow. The last one here is to take creative action, to do, make, and co-create solutions that reinforce our values. We're not a think tank, we're an action tank. We try to figure out how do we actually work in small, local, personal, and brief ways to create glimpses of the future we dream of. We don't create a building. We actually are selling our building. It should be sold within the week. But we don't create a place where people are going to spend the rest of their lives, which unfortunately is a feature of a lot of disability services. Here's the building, you move in, and you're probably never going to leave. Or if you do, you're going to go to a building just like it, right? It just asks people to make big compromises. And we thought a better way was to work in small, personal, local ways with them. You heard a lot of that from Bridget and Carol. We can also take action and know it matters, even if it doesn't promote a scalable solution. So we're looking for opportunities to do good work without worrying too much about what people call scale. What people call scale isn't scalable. That's usually what they're talking about. It's money and staffing. But money and staffing are not scalable. They're not sustainable. The only thing that we have found that's scalable is hearts and minds in the community. The only thing that we found that lasts is when we make an introduction, one neighbor to another, and we help them find common ground, common purpose, common responsibility, ways to intersect and intertwine their lives to work toward that good culture, that this place, the we of the relationship. We also borrowed the concept of the carbon footprint and set limits on the ways that we impact families, communities, and people's lives. We were borrowing a little bit of that from John McKnight's mentor, actually, Yvonne Illich, which he says, how do we set limits on the tools that we use? And he said, what if we set limits on our own services? Because if we jump in whole hog and we define people's lives and then kind of develop their entire identity around disability in our services, we end up creating a big old divide between their life and community life. And we didn't want to create that. So we intentionally set limits that our work resides in people's neighborhoods, that our staff are not front and center, that people and their neighbors and their families are, the people that actually live there, right? That's the critical. And it's kind of like a carbon footprint, right? Let's just do less harm environmentally. Well, we're asking, can we do less harm with our social service of Starfire? Can we help be behind the scenes, people that highlight people other than ourselves, if that makes sense? So those are the 4 core values. And again, just to remind you, we had to live our way into these. And that hopefully helps you a little bit, understand a little bit more about what we try to do and why we do it. Yeah. Cool. All the breakout rooms are closing in 56 seconds. I was right on time, Bridget, which you should tell me, like, give me an affirmation or something. I don't know. Are you proud of me?
You did great. Yeah, I mean, we did it. We made it. We all made it to a room.
You'll see on the recording, before this session, we had everybody but you in here at some point. Carol popped in, we sent her somewhere. Danyetta popped in, we sent her somewhere else. But then where Carol was where Danyetta was supposed to be. So I sent Danyetta there, and then Carol and Danyetta together. It's hilarious. And these people, Irene, Joni, Michelle, and Vic, are, I mean, seriously, rock stars, because they hung with it. I would have like logged off and typed something nasty in the chat. Like,
I was impressed by your adaptability, Tim, in just sending people on little journeys.
Yeah, yeah. Like you know, like you might have already told this story, but you're gonna like these people. You already had a good time with them, right? There's no problem with that. Everybody's back. Welcome, you all. That was terrific. I had a lot of fun and was excited to see all the Zooming. That was pretty fun too. So we're gonna do some more Zooming, okay? Bridget's gonna break us up into groups of 3, and we're just gonna kind of digest together. And really what we're looking for is what struck you and what themes did you notice? And then we'll come back and we'll kind of have a little dialogue about that, okay? So, Bridge, you ready?
Almost. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
There's somebody in our
best part.
Okay, gonna open the rooms.
Do you want us in any certain room, Bridget?
No, but let me move this lady to room 6. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask that too.
Oh, and I should stop recording.
Hit record.
Okay, I was going to remind you.
Hello, welcome back. Wait for the rest of those breakout rooms to join us. All right. Look at that. All right, welcome back in.
All right, let's hear from y'all. So one of the things that we love to do is in our small group harvest, we like to hear what you heard from somebody else that struck you, okay? And it's always just a discipline that we have is how do we affirm each other's voices? How do we say what you said mattered to me, right? So just as you're kind of reflecting back from that little small group discussion of what themes people heard or what struck people, don't say like, oh, I'm Tim and what I said was brilliant, right? Which it was, of course, we know that. Everything you all said was brilliant too. But what we want to know is what someone else said in your group that mattered to you. What gift did they give to you? And then you give it back by honoring what they said, right? Okay, ready? Easy as pie. Let's hear it. What did you hear? What do you want to lift up?
I'd like to honour whoever said this in one of the sessions, because there were so many, it was great, but I want to honour community and family last longer than any services.
I wrote that too.
They do. It's proven.
I had our last conversation, oh, with so many, I've written down heaps, but community heals.
That's a highlight for sure. Thank you, Katrina.
Irene Copper, or Opper rather, said she was struck by by Starfire's willingness to change. And I was really impressed with that comment. I thank you for saying that.
Just to piggyback off of that, she said that it's often hard to leave the old, especially when it's, you know, a tried and true and promised attractive way. So we thought all of those things were worth thinking on.
And we actually shared on that in our little triad conversation around the adaptability of Starfire to look for different ways of working that really put people with disabilities and their families at the center, and just do it differently. And I must admit, when we first got into our little breakout room, Danyetta, you've got a little fan club. We were like, we want to spend hours with Danyetta now. So, so thank you very much.
Michelle, I've already written her up on our website. We've adopted her. She's just going to be a cohort.
Oh my goodness, you're spoiling me.
While I'm unmuted, I just want to say mine's a little bit left of center, not quite what we talked about, but I want to acknowledge, so it's still lifting someone who's here, my good friend and colleague at YEDA, Vic. And Vic, I know, has been doing a personal practice of listening more and talking less. And I absolutely noticed that, Vic. And I think that it's something that is such a powerful thing to offer a circle or a conversation. So I really noticed that in you in that conversation, Vic.
Thank you, Dee. And I'd like to say I noticed that with your presence there today, because it was very important for that person to have a really good say, and that's part of our role. And these talks really trigger things in people, and to sit in that space is really, really important. And it's what can we do? What can we do? And it's part of it. Thank you. Peace back.
I just want to mention the, I can't remember who said it, creation of a better culture, generating that better culture, not just within one's own organisation, but making it resonate throughout so that the message goes up and out.
I found this whole session quite moving because I have a person with a disability in my family, my uncle, who's not had a good journey. One thing, and I've been tweeting bits and pieces when I've had time. I can't even remember who said this. Maybe it was definitely in one of the breakouts. No one is ever born to be a client. It's so simple, but I think we need to remember that. It's just such a small thing. Maybe that was Bridget. I can't remember, but that just really was a mic drop for me.
I'd like to add to that, and where Tim sat in that uncomfortable place, and he heard from that trio that beware of people who profit from other people's problems. And I sit in a place where human services are the dominating voice, and they profit from vulnerability that we're trying to get our community to pivot and understand their power within. So I know it, but when you said it, it hit me hard, Tim. So thank you.
Yeah, I was really struck by Danyetta's presentation, and I've done some work in the past in community and weaving together different people's stories into like a community performance and experience the power of that truth telling. And I was just reflecting, I've got a close family member with serious mental illness at the moment, and has suffered a lot of atrocities at the system. And so I feel like that's another area where processes like that could be very powerful.
Yeah, and Danny, to add to that, Joanne has in the chat here, I think the power of getting people up and moving around shouldn't be underestimated, right? And there's a whole nother section of learning that we've had around trauma and resiliency, and in particular, the brain science of meshing your body up with your thoughts and making sure that those are aligned. And part of that Black America Tree Project and the string exercise and the blanket exercise was being embodied and experiencing those things in a way that is, as for someone who's been through all three of them, unforgettable. Unforgettable. Cool. Well, We appreciate those little reflections, and there's probably more. We can hang on for a couple minutes if anybody has questions or other things they want to think on. We can stay here for a few minutes. We can also kind of like wrap up. You're free to go. We would say we're here for you. If anybody's interested and wants to, Joanne, if you want to think about like, hey, Carol hosts a brainstorming session every single month where people come and say, hey, this is the thing that's really bothering me. What could I do as a next step around that? And everybody we know jumps on that call and helps support each other, right? So you're welcome to that. It's free. It's on our time though, so it'd be 3 in the afternoon, which would be 5 in the morning for you, something like that, maybe 6. Let's see what your dedication level is.
Tim, one thing I'd like to put out there is a bit of a call to action potentially as well. And that's for you guys at Starfire and others. The Cody Institute in Nova Scotia in Canada, we've talked with them previously about the Kairos blanket and what would an ABCD version look like. And it's kind of something that's been on our radar that we'd like to eventually get around and talking to. So if anyone else is interested in maybe being part of those discussions, we'd love to kind of invite you into that and see what maybe we can co-create.
Yeah, I mean, count me in. I'm sure Danyetta, you'd be up for it. Danyetta wrote the Black American Tree Project.
Already whether she likes it or not.
Cool. And then I wrote the string exercise. So we have plenty of thinking around that stuff that we'd be happy to offer some brainstorming around.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we realize that these kind of things
I'd be interested too, Dee. I've designed similar kind of processing community in the past as well.
All right, excellent. I'll make a list.
When Danyetta was presenting, it made me reflect on what community actually gets to participate in. I'm a community member, but I work in an organization that has things that don't, they don't look as cool as the Kairos blanket or the string exercise or the Black American Tree Project, but I don't know whether we offer those things to community in my community. So to think, it started a thought process around where does community land in those kind of projects, those exercises.
I think that's a great thing to do. I know when we do these projects, we call them iterations and prototypes because that kind of, makes it more accessible to people, and it helps us to realize that we are learning as we go, and truly having people in the community come in as someone to help you prototype and think through it is a much better positioning than saying, okay, here's something that I've got, and you all learn this and that's it. So for me, that's been really helpful to be able to approach it that way.
Thank you.
Bridget, Carol, you want the last word here? Danyetta, anybody? What's your one bit of advice? I need you guys 3 seconds to think about this. I'm going to say, send them off. If they had to say one bit of advice from each of you, what would it be? Okay. Ready? Bridget.
I think it's just to appreciate people for who they are and really hone in on those gifts that everybody has.
Carol.
Go say hello to your neighbors. That's my wisdom for the evening. Get to know your neighbors, say hello, become a regular.
Danyetta.
Start in a place of authenticity for yourself, as far as where you would reach out or branch out, you know, and just start in that space, because I think that will be met with some surprises. Yeah.
That's great. So all about people, and yourself is one of them, right? Great bits of advice.
Hey, Tim,
Yes,
somebody wants to know if you and Bridget are related.
yes. She is my better half. It's wild being married and working together for 20 years. That's a heck of an accomplishment. It's really, but it's cool when you have good work and you can like keep at it, right? And also I want to give credit, like when we were going through the changes, we come home and we just be like, oh my gosh, can you believe what John McKnight said? He said we're profiting off of people's problems. When you have somebody else that can have their heart broke like that with you, then you can like, oh, what do we do about that, right? Then you can work together on how to react. So anyway, it's been a blessing. All right, good people. Happy unconferencing. And we really appreciate all the time and the energy and the questions and engagements. We really are grateful for all this and for the invitation to you and your team and Allison, to the planning team and all the good people that helped make this happen. Y'all are awesome. Come visit us in Kentucky, in Cincinnati.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.